Andre Schrecker is the most knowledgeable person in the world about education. He runs all the international testing and so forth, and he says the quality of a school, of a schooling in a country, is a reliable predictor of their success. So and that implies a huge competition. You know, the kids are going to school in China, and whether they're thinking about kids in America that are not doing their homework or so forth, I don't know, but they sure do their homework. They work hard. So here's some of our competitive entries in our competitive field. 25% of our high school graduates cannot read beyond a 10-year-old level. 25%. Of the 8% of our population that does not have a high school degree, 40% of them cannot read. You'll see this number again in a minute. So that's 60.7 million people who cannot read out of 330 million, which is the most recent population number. Is that a competitive entry into the world marketplace of competition? 47% of our seniors, high school seniors, graduate with an A average. Almost all grades given in high schools are A's and B's anymore. U.S. ranks in the bottom 25% of the developed nations in students' mathematical skills. 25. And there's a law on our books in this country that says our students will be in the top 10% of the world's kids in math. That was passed under George W. Bush. And we are now in the bottom 25%. Our millennials, currently aged 27 to 42 years old, have the lowest scores of any millennial group in the world. The lowest scores. I'm sure some of you are in that group. I don't insult you, but when I gave this talk in 2016, it was about my first book, which is called The Kids Are Smart Enough, So What's the Problem? And it was laying out all kinds of issues, some of which I just related to you about the quality of our system. And I was done. I did my book, and I was finished. And my wife, Bonnie, some of you know Bonnie, she said, look, all you've been doing is digging up dirt. Tell us how to fix it. Jeez, I don't know how to fix it. It's huge. It's a gigantic problem. And she says, think about it. You'll figure it out. Well, I spent 3 years trying to figure out how to do it, and I don't know whether I've got it solved or not, but I've sure got a good start on it in the book. I've got 22 reform factors that I think would really help. So that's why I proceeded onward to try to solve some of these problems. Okay, the former saying about wealth following education. Singapore, at the end of World War II, had a big meeting and said, well, we're going to decide whether they're going to be cheap labor or we're going to be smart labor. They chose smart labor. IU goes every year. I used to be a professor at IU. We'd send delegations to Singapore to recruit their students to come to Bloomington. And it worked. I had a lot of Singaporean students in my classes. South Korea, at the end of the Korean War, was a peasant farmer industry, agrarian to the hilt. Park, the president of South Korea, said, hey, we're going to be an R&D force in our future. Look what's happened to Korea. Huge robotics technology place in the world for that kind of technology. They made a decision. Wealth follows education, and they are wealthy. Now, it also works for states if you get a big enough piece of geography. So I had some data that show that in 1993, Maryland and Massachusetts were almost identically wealthy, about $25,000 per capita income. And then 25 years later, Maryland was 63 and Massachusetts was 71,000, a difference of $8,452. So I put this on a spreadsheet. I did all of the intervening years by picking the right growth rate and so forth. And what we find out is that Massachusetts has gained $546 billion. Billion dollars. Now, this is like the old math problems that we engineers had before we had computers. Where do you put the decimal point? I struggled with that. It just seemed like too much, but that's what it is. You got, in that year alone, you've got 6.9 million people times 8,000 something. So that's like $50 billion just for that 1 year. So does wealth follow education? Well, Massachusetts had a major reform at the end of the 80s and in the early 90s. In 93, they passed the Reform Act, mostly based on standards. Didn't cost much. Okay, so we are not competing properly in that race. So